Your Presto Pressure Canner and how to check that it's coming up to pressure correctly. When we're putting the lid on the lid you'll see an arrow embossed in the top of the lid, and this coincides with an arrow on the handle of the cooker. So you line up the two and then the lid just turns easily to lock shut. Put it on the heat, and at this stage we're leaving it with nothing on the part where the pressure regulator sits. Cut. Initially you'll see no action from the pressure gauge. What's happening at the moment is that the heat is heating up the contents of the canner, and we're going to leave it to get up to pressure, build up some heat, and eventually we'll start to see a bit of steam coming out of this air vent. My pressure canner has now come up to heat, and you can see there's steam escaping from that air vent. Once I've seen that start to happen, I've reduced the heat, and this has been now venting for 10 minutes. That means that I'm now ready to apply the pressure regulator to my canner. I'm using a 15-pound weight today, but if I was doing a large batch of canning I'd be using my 3-piece regulator. I'm just going to pop that on top, and you'll see that instantly I'm starting to get some jiggling from this little outlet here. This is going to jiggle away, a little bit of water is going to come out, that's completely normal, and gradually the pressure inside my canner is going to start building and cause this to pop right up. You can now see that the little button has come right up. That means that now the canner is starting to build up pressure. So you'll see that the button has come up completely, but even at this stage my gauge is still registering 0. Just need to be patient and wait a little bit for the canner to build up pressure. So don't get too anxious if you're not seeing any change in the pressure. It will start to happen. In fact, as we're speaking, you can see that the little dial is starting to rise now. If I was using my pressure canner with a 15-pound weight on it and I wanted to process my food at 10 or 11 psi, once it reached the 10 or 11 on the gauge, I would then need to start adjusting the heat to keep the temperature even and to keep the pressure at that point on the dial. When I use my 3-piece regulator, I can set it so that this little gauge is sitting at 10 psi, and then it'll automatically jiggle and roll around, release pressure, and keep the pressure automatically at 10 psi without me having to adjust the temperature. You can see my canner now is just about at 15 psi, and note how the pressure regulator is now starting to spin and jiggle, and it's venting off the pressure. So it's just going to hold the pressure at 15 psi. Now it's pretty vigorous now. So I really need to start adjusting the heat so that doesn't need to be jiggling that furiously. So I can turn the heat down a bit just to keep it at a gentle simmer so that the pressure's still remaining, but it's not jiggling quite so loudly and quite so furiously. As soon as you have your canner set at the right temperature and the right pressure, this is the time at which you start counting the time for your processing. The processing time starts once the pressure canner reaches the desired pressure. Okay, so we'll leave that now for the time required. Okay, my time has now elapsed and I'm ready to take the steps to cool down my canner. So the first step is to turn off the heat, And very quickly the pressure regulator is going to stop wobbling around. Now again, this is going to be a slow process. It took time to come up to pressure, and it's now going to take time to cool down. When we're pressure canning, we do not go and put the pressure canner under cold water to cool it down. It has to cool itself down naturally. So we leave everything in place. We don't remove this because that's going to cause a whole heap of steam, very hot steam, to come out of the air vent. So we just leave it sitting now. You'll see that already the dial is dropping back pressure very quickly. You'll then see that as that reaches zero, the little vent here will pop back down. And when that's back down and the gauge is showing zero, at that time it's then safe to remove your pressure regulator, and then very carefully remove the lid of the canner. You just want to be very, very careful when you take the lid off, because remember, there'll be steam inside the canner still, so it will be hot and there is the chance that you could burn yourself. So that's pretty much it, how to use your Presto pressure canner. Happy canning!